Hi. Right, so welcome to Leadership with Miss Snuffy, episode 4 or 5, I can't really remember. And it's been a little while, Christmas happened, and anyway, I'm here. And I want to talk about hiring staff and hiring generally, not just in schools, mainly because over the holidays, people were on Twitter talking about hiring and diversity. And they were saying how there seem to be two camps. There are people who tend to be on the left who say we need to have more diversity in staff, not just in schools, but in all kinds of organizations, and that this should be representative perhaps of the kids who you teach. And then there's this other camp who say, no, you have to hire the best person, and that's it. And you kind of have to be on one camp or the other. And the people who say you have to hire the best person say, there isn't much racism. There's a few weirdos out there who are racist, and then that's it. And then there's the people who, on the other side, who say there's so much racism, ethnic people can't be promoted into positions, and they can't get jobs, etc. And the thing is, as with most of these things, I think the truth is somewhere in between. I think it's wrong to deliberately hire somebody because of their race. So you're thinking, I've got to make my staff more diverse. I'm going to make sure I definitely hire a black person. But I also think it's wrong to pretend that one always hires the best person for the job, even if race didn't come into it. Let's say, you're in a monoculture, there's only white people, let's say. It's really hard. I think it's really hard hiring people and getting it right. I think it's really hard figuring out who is the best person for the job. And anybody who's honest with themselves and who's ever been on a panel choosing people for a job will admit that. Mistakes are often made. And sometimes, who is the best person for the job? Do you end up choosing the person who's just going to be a right fit, who just fits the team, or who actually has the best skills? Or do you hire somebody who 2 years ago wouldn't have been ideal, but now is ideal, or perhaps in 2 years will be ideal? There are so many factors that go into figuring out whether or not you want to hire somebody that it would be absurd to suggest that race won't have something to do with that. And when I say something to do with that, it is human nature to hire in one's own image. And when I say one's own image, not just the way one looks, but if somebody happened to go to the same university as you did, or if somebody happened to grow up in the same town that you grew up in, you have a connection. And sometimes when you have that connection, you can easily think that that person is perfect in comparison to somebody else simply because of that connection. The same thing goes for when you meet friends or people get into relationships. Sometimes things just click for some reason, and it's not because they're the best person. It's simply because they clicked. And to deny that, as the camp on the right tend to do, which is that, you must just hire the best person, and everybody always just hires the best person, and this is just absurd, this suggestion that you might want to make your workforce more diverse, I just think it's inherently dishonest. If you've been on a panel where you're trying to pick between people and you know that sometimes things just go a certain way, which is why people give advice like make sure your handshake is great, make sure you look at them in the eye, because people often make decisions in the first 3 minutes of an interview about whether or not they want to hire somebody. And that has nothing to do with whether or not they're the best person. It has to do with whether or not they click. And if you've been to the right school or you look a certain way, then often that click will happen. And that's something I don't think we can deny. There's all sorts of studies that have been done about CVs, for instance, that they're sent out into the workplace. And if you have a black-sounding name in comparison to a white-sounding name, you're far less likely to even be shortlisted for the job. So the evidence is there. But even without the evidence, anyone who's honest should recognize that these are issues in the workplace. But then the other side goes to the other extreme of saying, right, we have to make sure that we have one black person and one Indian person and one woman and all this kind of nonsense. And that is crazy. That's crazy. And it will turn people a bit mad. They're unable then to actually judge people for whether or not they're great for the job. So how do you do that? I don't want to get to that point. How do you do that? How do you judge? with us being the kind of school that we are, when people come for interview, I always say, actually, yeah, when they come for interview, right before they even go around the school, do a tour, I grab them for 5 minutes, and we always just have one person in for interview at a time, because it allows you to really just concentrate on that person. And I always say, this is what we are as a school. We're very different. And then I go through the things that I think they might not like us for. So I say, you realize, for instance, that we give out detentions to kids for not having a pen. Is that something that you would feel comfortable with? Because if you don't feel comfortable with doing that, and you think, oh, that's a bit mean, then maybe this isn't the right school for you, and that's okay. And today isn't just about us figuring out whether we want you, it's about you figuring out whether you want us. And I make it really clear that when they're going around on their tour, they should look around the place and think to themselves, well, is this right for me? Is this a place I'd be happy? And I say to them, because I'd far prefer for you to figure out today whether or not you want the job, rather than come to me 6 weeks in and say, this isn't the right place for me. It will make my life much easier. And because of that, sometimes I have teachers who, at 11 o'clock, and this isn't just teachers, this is everybody, actually, office staff, kitchen staff, caretakers, whoever. And I sometimes have staff who then say, candidates who say at 11 o'clock, you know what, actually, I don't think it's the right place for me, and off they go. And I explain that, the problem with interviews is that they're set up in such a way that in order for the person to win, they need to get the job. But maybe they don't want the job. And if they don't want the job, then the win is to figure that out today. So that's the key point, really, I think, of this video, is really just to say, really I need to make a second video on the complicated ways in which one's own biases can prevent one from hiring the best person for the job. But two, you want to make sure that the person who's coming for the job also really wants the job and understands everything about you. And as I say, I go through the things that I think are the negatives from their point of view that might make them decide, that's not right for us. And you got to be bold in that way, even with your science candidates and your maths candidates and the candidates you think, oh my goodness, I'm never going to be able to appoint, because we at Michaela have the same problems as everybody else. I promise you we do. But you got to be bold, you got to be brave, so that you can get the right staff for your school. So, I meant to talk about something I've learned. I've forgotten because it's been so long. Oh gosh, what have I learned? This is the first thing this morning, and I'm trying to think, what have I learned today? Had a parent meeting, actually, just a moment ago. And I held my ground. I made it really clear, these are the rules of the school, and parents need to get with the rules of the school. And they need to follow it, even though when they're saying, oh, I don't want to follow this rule. And I say, well, these are our rules. Everybody has to follow those rules. You need to keep your standards high. And what did I learn? Well, I always learn in all of those parents' meetings, actually, how important it is to hold the line. Because otherwise you let the child down, and you let all of your children down, and you don't want to do that, because we're in the business of making children's lives better. All right, thanks. See you next time. Bye.